On this week's show, we're going to forego our usual format to bring you something extra special. It is our incredible honor to be joined by Thierry Boulanger, game designer, director, and writer of The Messenger, one of the most critically acclaimed indie games in recent memory. So grab your blade and watch your cloud step, because things are about to get deep. This is Nintendo Dual Screens, episode 109. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Nintendo Dual Screens episode 109 for the week of July 29th, 2018. And I gotta be honest, I nailed that cold open like a split hog, didn't I, Andy? Didn't I?
Did you say 2018?
I said 19. I said 19. Maybe you heard 18 because
This is good. Yeah.
because of the whole time travel thing of the Messenger.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So this is going to be a fun one because I feel it's our first official deep dive into a game on this podcast. And it's going to go from, so describe the game to us, to tell us your darkest fears.
Oh, yes. And I, of course, am Stephen Fontana. I'm one of your hosts. With me, as always, is Andy Asimakis, who you just heard, and the third voice here. And the topic of this program this week, episode 109, is Thierry. How are you, man?
Hey, I'm great. How are you guys?
Doing really well. I spent a good 3 to 5 minutes panicking over the pronunciation of your name, as you know. We went over this beforehand. Turns out you also had the same issues with my name, because I have a PH in there and the French in you wanted to say Stefan, and that's fine. I get that a lot.
Right.
But we're here. We're doing the thing. Now, folks, you are getting a special episode. We mentioned this last week, and we've kind of been mentioning it on all of our content. But Andy is going away. He's going to Japan land, and then he's going to somewhere in another island somewhere, Philippines or something like that. I don't know. If you want to assassinate him, that's where he's going to be in the next week or week and a half. Anyway, so he's not going to be here to record. So we're going to do this special episode so that you don't go a week without content, because that's just egregious. We can never do that. Isn't that right, Andy?
Oh, it's so right.
We did it once, I
right.
think, in our entire time where we
Once
didn't put
and
out an
never
episode.
again. Fans were in an uproar. We
Yeah.
got so much hate mail that week.
We did. It was mostly from Tricky, who runs ProvenGamer.com, which is where you can, which is who hosts this podcast, and we're very gracious and we're very thankful. Anyway, for those of you who are new to the Nintendo Dual Screens podcast, this is an interview show where Andy and I bring on an industry guest to talk about the Nindies and Nintendo's past, present, and future. Nintendo Dual Screens posts each and every Monday for your listening pleasure on your podcast service of choice, including YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, the outliers, as it were. You can find the show, as I said, on our YouTube channel. I didn't realize you rewrote that, Andy. I'm sorry. I thought you forgot it. And, of course, you can go to dualscreens.com.
Just put some trust, a little bit of trust in me.
109 episodes, man, plus like 60 bonus episodes and pre-shows and post-shows. You know, we're if I was to guess, I would say we're somewhere over about 400 hours of content that you and I have done over the last 2+
My
years.
goal is to make this intro as tight as the Messenger's gameplay. All right, that's my goal in life, to make the show run as smooth as that game.
Terry, if you are uncomfortable with having Andy's head so far up your ass, you let me know. I'll pull him out for you.
I'm looking for polyps, Steve.
I know it could be a little uncomfortable up there. But anyway, listeners, you can support us by going to patreon.com /NDS podcast, just like our Patreon producer, Alex Gonzalez, the Grandmaster himself. Thank you so much, Alex. We cannot continue to grow without your support. And remember, you can support us as little as $1, and that $1 gets you a bonus episode every month, which you vote on the topic of discussion. Plus, it gets you access to our our super secret VIP Discord channel, which has not only us in it, and other fans, but also has our indie dev guests and voice talent, and whoever really wants to join us or has Discord or knows what they're doing with Discord, they join us and they hang out and they talk with you guys about game development, about what's hot, what's not, all the above. It's a great place to hang out, and you could get that for just $1. Speaking of Patreon, we're giving some shit away. That's going to happen, but I'm going to have to edit that in later because, again, we are recording this way in advance, so you haven't even had a chance to retweet this episode or last week's episode yet by the time we're recording this. So we are giving away a copy of Streets of Rogue on the Nintendo Switch. So let's do it right now. I'm going to cut away. This is going to be the winner. Ladies and gentlemen, the winner is you, Future Steve. Take it away. Thank you very much, present day Steve, current Steve. This is future Steve. Jack is behind me playing with his toys. I am here to let you know the winner of this week's contest, and it was a close one. It was a close one because not many of you retweeted this episode, which is very upsetting. So you're all dumb jerks. Anyway, the winner of this week's prize is Son of Edmund. That's at Son of Edmund. And Son of Edmund, I checked out your YouTube channel because you fancy yourself a YouTube musical comedian, and kudos, sir. Your music is very funny and you're very good. So not only do you win a prize, but you're also getting a shout out on this podcast. So listeners, go check out Son of Edmund. That's at SONOFEDMUND. And Jack wants to sing into the microphone. Jack, you want to say something in the microphone?
I love you.
He loves me. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you later. President Steve, back to you. Incredible. What a winner. What a winner. Thank you, Future Steve. That was wonderful. That was wonderful.
I love Future Steve.
Future Steve is great because he's in the future, so you don't have to listen to him. So he's great.
I wish you were more like Future Steve.
I do. I agree. I agree.
And I'm sure your wife does as well.
Everybody does. Future Steve. I mean, you saw the picture of Future Steve. I used that Face app and gave Russia all
Oh
my
God,
data.
no, stop. No, we're not going
You
there.
saw Future Steve.
We're not going there. We're not
You
going
saw
there.
him. You saw his liver spotted face. You saw it. Remember, each and every
stuff from my nightmares.
Yeah. Remember, each and every week we have something fun to give away, so be sure to wait until the end of the show to find out what we're giving away this week. Hint, hint, it's probably the messenger. And all you got to do is retweet this episode from our Twitter account, which is at NDS Podcast, to enter. If you want to be a part of the show, you could do so by emailing us your feedback, your comments, your concerns, your questions to feedback@ndspodcast.com. Now, it's time to get into the nitty-gritty here. All right? I've made Thierry wait long enough. Andy, we're going to talk about the messenger. We're going to talk about a lot of crazy shit.
Time for the deep dive.
I'm real excited. I'm going to let you take this part away cuz I'm parched. I've been talking like a mental patient. So, I'm going to pass this one off to you.
As per usual. So I think, well, first off, Thierry, thank you for coming on the show. We are humbled by your presence.
Oh, no way. I mean, it's my pleasure.
Huge fans of the game. So let's start this journey at the beginning and talk about young Thierry. And what got you into gaming, and what were some of your earliest memories as a young gamer?
Oh, wow. First, so, I mean, I was born mid-1980s, right? And so when I was 3 years old, my brother got the NES for his birthday when he was 5. So it was Super Mario Brothers 1 and a baseball game, which I still play, even though I never really liked it because I have memories attached to it now. It's Baseball Stars.
Yeah, Baseball Stars are great.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just from the moment I first played Mario and I was like, it just connected, you know? I think I just had that click moment, like a lot of gamers or a lot of industry folk, you know, it just did it for me right away. I knew it was what I wanted to do all the time. And so it's been a struggle for a long time, you know. It's the reason why I wouldn't study, and then it's the thing that made me study, you know. And so, yeah, I mean, I went through all the hoops of, you know, it was seen as a problem, you know. And eventually people around you start taking you seriously because you make a job out of it. And so I was fortunate in that, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah. And then along came a game that really impacted you, and that was Ninja Gaiden.
Oh, yeah.
Huge impact on your life.
Oh, yeah. It's in the top 5 for sure. Well, yeah, I mean, it's just
Wait, hold on. It's in the top
that?
5. It's in the top 5. Yet you
Yeah.
made The Messenger. What game are you gonna make based on your top favorite game of all time? I need to play that game.
I mean,
We'll get to that later, Steven. That's below in the bullet points.
we'll see. I mean, yeah, it's yeah. I mean, and the worst part is I've said many times what my favorite game is, so it's kind of hard to hide at this point. But I mean, we can't really, we have nothing to announce obviously yet. But yeah, no. So yeah, Ninja Gaiden is definitely in there, and it was it was definitely the first one that had a big impact. You know, in that top 5, it's the one that came first. And what happened was that my grandfather visited us one day without even saying that he would, which was kind of weird because he lived like almost 2 hours away, you know. So I'd always know at least a week in advance and be super excited. He just showed up alone one afternoon with a big paper bag full of NES games.
Wow, so he strong-armed some small child or robbed some store, took all the games, and ran directly to your house to get rid of the evidence. Wow,
Yeah.
Grandpa's a hardcore. I like Grandpa.
That's the thing. He wasn't even a gamer, but he knew that I was always talking about games, you know. And I finally got the backstory on that, which is that an uncle of mine that I rarely saw ran a video store or a rental place, you know, for movies. And so he ended up closing. So my grandfather just went in there and just grabbed all the games.
Wow, that's awesome.
What
Yeah.
a sweetheart. Oh, it's failing your business, but can I get some of those games and just get to my grandson really quickly?
I mean, we made another business out of it, so to the family tree, I guess it's fine. But
It's all full circle.
but yes. And so what happened is that then my mom said, like, well, you don't really get to keep that because you're not really good at school and you don't really pay attention and you don't behave. And so he didn't really warn me. I would have said no, you know. And she was kind of caught off guard. And she said, okay, you get to pick 6 games out of that bag. And so I just had the most magical afternoon, you know, of going through something like probably 22 games, you know. And you know, Metroid was in there and Contra and just everything, Zelda 1, Zelda 2. And so I had like the yes pile, the maybe pile, and the no pile.
Oh my
You know,
God.
and so
Like a dream come true for
and I
any
was
kid.
probably oh yeah, and it was so like I mean it was magical, and I was probably like around 7 or 8. And what happened was that I had a pile for I just called them scary games, you know. And so Castlevania 3 was on there, and Ninja Gaiden 2 also. I thought like, oh, these games are too scary. It's just the way I felt, you know. But I figured I'll grow older and then I'll want to play scary games or whatever, you know. I'll be more mature games or whatever. And in the end, it came down to either Ninja Gaiden 2 or Castlevania 3, and I picked Ninja Gaiden 2. And so it's kind of funny because we probably have made a totally different game, you know, had I picked Castlevania 3, you know, as my classic that I would then beat every day. And I moved on to getting an alarm clock so I could play it every morning before school, you know. And so
That's like Sophie's Choice right there. Those are 2 great games.
Yeah.
You can't.
Oh, yeah.
Those are 2 really good games.
But you didn't have the top 20s back then, you know. You didn't really know. Those games just, at least to me, just fell out of the sky, you know. And so I didn't know that what I had, all those choices were all that would be the top games, you know, for forever for so many people, you know. And so it was kind of a blessing to be innocent, you know, in front of all these great games.
So your mom making you make the choice to keep 6 games. I could only assume she is some sort of Secret Service operative, because that is some top level interrogation shit. That is top tier. I can't imagine I can't imagine it because I used to go into the video store and I would do that very same thing with my $3 in my hand, whatever it was, to rent the game for a weekend, and I'd sit there. It wasn't like Blockbuster or anything. It was just like the local store, and they had all these games on the thing, and I would do the same thing. I would just make a list. I'd be like, okay, it's down to these 10, now these 4, and then this one's in a maybe, and then now the maybe's back in the yes pile, and that, you know, it's just I know that feeling as a kid, but your mom was pretty hardcore with that stuff. That's pretty great. Like Andy and I grew up very differently, and I seem to be kind of you're actually kind of in the middle of the 2 of us in how we grew up with video games, because I have an older brother as well, and he had all these systems too. And I just grew up with it, in my life. And my parents didn't make me make the decision based on my grades. My grades were always bad, and they never got better. And that's why I do this podcast in my living room while my wife is locking herself in the bedroom. But Andy had parents that just restricted video games altogether. Video games were not an option at all.
Oh yeah, they were just like, do these chores and you'll play games, and they would just lie to my face.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. You kind of fall right in the middle of us. Andy, what do you got? Take us on this journey. I know you have a whole journey mapped out.
Play Ninja Gaiden, and it's a huge impact, and you're a young kid, and you're this game that became the messenger. Like the first steps were back in your youth in elementary school.
Yeah.
So did you carry this all the way through, or did you at some point say to yourself, "Oh yeah, I had this idea when I was a kid. I should start working on this thing." Like, how did it go from being a dream as a child to a reality as a game developer?
Well, I mean, obviously the 16-bit idea didn't come to me before the Super NES, right? But
Clearly,
but this idea of the ninja completely blew me away. I just thought it was so cool, because I was growing up with the Ninja Turtles, Three Ninjas movies. And so, ninjas were just a big deal, and I was right as those movies were coming out. I was hyped for them, and so it was kind of like the game where you got to play a ninja, and that the gameplay was actually tight, and I've always said I'd rather play a bad game where you play a ninja than a good game where you don't, and so I try, Last Ninja, I can't really do it, but I still played it a lot, and things like that. And so, I mean, for me, and so I was drawing ninjas back then, and how they say that if you do 10,000 drawings, you're good at drawing. I mean, I still draw like I'm 4, so that's not true. I did my 10,000, I still cannot draw, at all.
Even when we do 10,000 podcasts, we'll be good at it.
We will finally hit our mark. Finally hit our stride.
But yeah, so from there I started just creating this world, and it became, so it's been probably something like 25 years, going for me. So there's not really a point where it's not like, oh, the script, the scenario, everything was already written by the time I was 12 or whatever, but I just slowly, just as life happened, I kept building this fantasy world in my mind. And the idea was to eventually one day, put it together. But it's not, I mean, Messenger is one game, but everything that we will do as Sabotage it's all part of the same universe, and so Messenger is just one story in that world,
So I'm glad you brought up Sabotage. I don't mean to cut you off, Andy, but so I see where Andy's going with his roadmap here. So I figured I won't let him take all the glory here. So let's talk about Sabotage a little bit, okay?
Sure.
So when did this was this a thing before Sabotage and something that you brought into Sabotage Studio, or was this something that formed because of the game? Like, how did that relationship start?
Right. Okay. So I've always wanted to make the ninja game as a first game. Right. You take the side scroller. It's not that there's always a challenge, but it's not an MMO. It's kind of like you can actually approach this, during evenings and weekends, and so that's why it's the first game that we made. So what happened is I went to school to study game dev because I can't draw, but I was like, maybe I can code, because looking at my heroes when I was young, the Peter Molyneux and the Sid Meier's, and it's like, oh, I guess you go in through one of the crafts, then eventually I always thought of game designer as something that you emerge as once you're ready or whatever, once you've had enough experience that maybe you can call some vision shots, and not not send a team in the ditch, because it's very it's kind of a lot of power to be playing with, to have all those people just ready to go full speed, and if you steer them wrong, then it's a lot of stuff that you have to rework and do all over again, and all those, So for me, it was like, okay, I guess I can code, and I'll do that until I feel basically ready to make my own game, And so when I was in school, I was in 2006, and so I did in Flash a first prototype. It was called Darkest Night, and it was just one level, and you were playing a ninja, but it was in game dev school, so you did all the animation, everything, and the code. And so it was just a side scroller, but you had, the dark purple, the black, so it was basically the Autumn Hills. The first level in the Messenger was kind of like an attempt at doing that, with me being terrible at art. So that and then for 10 years I worked as a lead programmer in servicing studios. So we do, games for, we worked on Skylanders, things like, for Activision or Marvel, things like that. We did mobile games, And then at some point you meet enough people that you're all cut from the same cloth, And I was like, oh, all right, I think I feel ready now. And so I started working with Phil, who's our level designer. He's a senior from Ubisoft. He worked on the first Assassin's Creed and Prince of Persia before that.
Oh, wow.
He's been working in games for a long time. I was kind of starstruck when I first met him, and then he thought I was funny, and so we started hanging out. And at some point, we would play retro games at my place every Wednesday night, and I started telling him about, hey, Ninja Gaiden's a big deal. I had this idea. He was like, that sounds pretty cool. And so the two of us started working evenings and weekends on our first prototype for Messenger. And then after about a year, we had something playable. It was all around the cloud step, which was the just this little twist on the double jump was like, will this carry the game? So we just tried it out, and then it showed promise, so we kept going. And then I met Rainbow Dragon Eyes, our composer, as he was touring. He was in Quebec. I said, hey man, you're my favorite composer. Let's make a retro game. He was like, yeah, let's do it. That's basically how it went. It took like 2 minutes.
Oh my god!
Yeah. Oh yeah, and so
Make it sound so easy.
well, legit, I was really surprised, because he was touring, he was drumming for a pirate music band, and he wasn't expecting, he wasn't showing up as Rainbow Dragon Eyes, and I was like, hey, I'm a huge fan of Rainbow Dragon Eyes. He gave me a double high five. I said, hey, so I just did a terrible pitch, like stuttering and everything. So I'm a developer, and I want to make this like ninja retro, and he cut me off. He said, yes, I'll make your music. And I was like, what? No way. And he said something to the effect of like, I mean, dude, if it all works out, that's the best origin story to tell. So here we are,
That's awesome.
And so from there, he was commissioned just to do one track, which was the Autumn Hills track.
Yes.
This thing that gets stuck in everyone. We just call it the balloon. It's like he's using a balloon, letting the air out. Like, anyway, so we wanted to shoot that video clip at some point of him with a balloon, but. And so we've been listening to that track for, I guess, almost 4 years at this point, and I guess it's still good. But so from there once we had like a playable prototype with a legit 8-bit written in FamiTracker, like an actual NES ROM playing the audio in there, it was kind of like, hey, it kind of sings now, it looks like a real game. And so that's when it basically moved to the next level. So Martin, who's the guy I founded Sabotage with, who was a longtime friend, because for 10 years we were in the same studio. And he had all the chops for, financing, and because, in Canada, there's like bags of money flying around if you know how to ask, with programs with the government, and like they will fund initiatives of like business trying to start and studios that have good idea of things that relate to culture, So if we want to shoot a music video, or we want to make a movie, or, a game as part of those programs. And so Martin figured that part out. And then we were funded, and then over about a year, we moved from 2 to 12 employees. And then we were working full time on. Oh, I'm sorry, we bootstrapped by. So Oddworld, right? We bootstrapped by working for Oddworld.
I love Oddworld.
So Lorne Lanning, yeah. So that's another perk of working for a few years in the industry. You end up meeting people, And so as a way for us to bootstrap the company, we needed income as we were looking for funding. So we were doing, quote unquote service work, but it was very much a full on, awesome gig. It wasn't like, oh, we have a client, It's like,
Right.
No way, we get to touch Oddworld, So we did that at first. I was doing that as a coder. So it was like that for the first 6 months, and eventually, so we still have people working for them. Just because Oddworld is awesome, but so we have 2 guys now that's still on that project.
That is an incredible story. It's like all the right pieces fall in the right places for you. Like, was there a genie lamp in that brown bag your grandfather brought home that day?
Sometimes I think so, but it's also that. It was kind of like everything falling into place, but it was all after. I'm telling the sunny version of all that story.
Right. I'm sure there were some challenges along the way when you're
absolutely, yeah.
A whole from the ground up a brand new studio,
and almost giving up about 3 million times, in the process, and all the doubt and all of that and all the things that almost came so close to never happening, or, all the things that could have went wrong but ended up not, or people who showed up exactly at the right time. There's so much of that.
So what were some of those challenges? Like you're saying, like there was some things that it could at some point it could fall apart at any moment. Like what were the things that were in your way?
Well, so I mean, there's things like, okay, so one example is the first time we pitch to get funding, the answer that we get is, who are you guys, and why do you think there's a market for a Pixel Ninja, and we're like, I don't know. I mean, retro games do well, and turns out they're like, nope, unless you're doing VR, we don't care to fund. It's like, yeah.
Wait, what?
I mean, it's like we're not in the gimmick business of like just to get funding, we'll do a thing that supposedly may or may not, become a thing. And so just sticking to our guns, of the vision, and not making compromises of trying to please, everyone in a way, if that makes sense. Because it's kind of a niche game, even though it's a big niche if you manage to kick into it properly, but it's still a big niche, so, but it's still a niche. I mean, so yeah, definitely funding was a big challenge at first, because it wasn't like, hey, we're all 22 and we'll just work off of our basements and we don't care, it's like we have employees that have kids and houses, and so it was like we need to offer work conditions that they would get at Ubisoft on the other side of the street, So it's not just like, yeah, give me $50 and we're good for 6 months, So it was kind of a challenge, but then that made our production and our really predictable, because we have people that they really deliver, and there were some challenges because there always are in dev, but it was really streamlined because it was all people that I've been working with for up to 10 years for most of them, So we knew that communication and dedication were there, and so.
Wow. That's awesome. It's disheartening to see that funding could be so hard to get. I mean, that's just a common story. It's like, I know plenty of devs that or aspiring developers that I grew up with that, like, that's always the hurdle. It's like, I could continue doing this every single night, but eventually I'm going to need to have some income here. And then they make that decision. Do I want the job or do I want to make my thing and pursue funding for my thing? And, it's always hard to hear those stories, but it's awesome when they succeed,
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about the game's actual design choices here. So, the first thing I want to get into is the cloud step, because you mentioned that you weren't sure if a whole game could be based on that. So, can you talk about that, the cloud step's genesis and why it works so well?
Well, so the first thing there is that I think, and that's just my personal preference, but I think games should be based on something really simple that is satisfying moment to moment, right? And so that was the hypothesis, if you will. Like, does that feel rewarding enough that you'll never get tired of pulling it off, because I can think of, when a balloon's almost out of helium, or however you pronounce that in English, and it's kind of like falling, but you can kick it back up and it'll stick to the roof for like a few seconds and then it starts falling again. Right. It's kind of like that with the player's attention and motivation to continue. Like, if you don't kick the balloon up again periodically, the moment it touches the floor, they quit the game and they never play again, and they don't tell their friends or whatever. They don't come back to it, Right. And so it's like, is that enough to constantly like keep you, and in retrospect, I wish we kind of used it more for boss fights, but anyway, that's another thing. But the idea was that at first to have that promise of twist, like the way I like to approach design is messing up, or at least messing with expectations, and so that was kind of like a first of, can we make a twist on something so obvious, so overdone, and already nailed, that already it shows like there's a thing that clicks right away for players, and that they remember, and then that they wish they could use in another game, but then it sucks because they can't,
It kind of reminds me. I'm sorry. It kind of reminds me of like I'm trying to think of like a metaphor for that, and I'm thinking of like a first-person shooter. What's the one thing that you want the player to continue to do and enjoy doing is shooting. But if you have one gun in the whole game, maybe that's not going to hold their attention very long. But then you introduce shotguns and
Right.
automatic rifles and yada yada and grenade launchers and all this shit. You're still doing the same thing. You're still shooting, but the scenario and the circumstance changes to keep the player's attention.
Right, and then if you consider a game like Gears of War, which has a quick time event gameplay and reloading, where a thing that's usually a hindrance actually turns into giving you momentum, then you're like, wow, we just turned something annoying into something fun, and it happens really often, so it's still things like this. But if you want a more technical answer on the cloud step, the sort of like the technical analysis behind it was, so you have your game loop, and so if you take the Diablo model, which is the classic that we use when teaching game design, is like, okay, so I'm fighting enemies, so I have money, so I go to the shop, and so I buy a better sword. With my better sword, I kill a bigger enemy, which gives me more money, which gives me a better sword, and it never ends, right? So that's your game loop in a way. So when you move from one sphere to the other, you're kind of like in that never-ending cycle of basically playing the game and being engaged. Now, how often that happens is kind of like when you move from one sphere to the other, it's when you feel a bit of satisfaction and then you feel compelled to keep going, right? So the idea with the cloud step was, what if we had a game loop so microscopic that it would happen moment to moment? So that's when we have it. So we have navigation and we have combat, right? And the idea was to have an arrow from combat to navigation and also from navigation to combat. So usually if you take, I hope this makes sense, but basically the idea is that instead of just I'm navigating, and there's combat, so I'm just fighting, is that those two systems kick into one another. So that navigating gives me opportunities for combat and combat gives me opportunities for navigation. So that's how the cloud step just basically emerged as a logical conclusion. Like attacking something has to give me a platforming opportunity. So it's like, there you go, it gives you a jump. So you go from one, in your loop, you go from just by attacking and jumping, you're constantly hopping from one to the other. So you're reading the layout, reading the enemies, and you go back and forth. So you're engaged, basically.
Like, you wouldn't think you could redefine the idea of a double jump in the game. Like, when we first saw that, it was mind-blowing. Like, oh shit, there's a second jump now I can do? But this makes you have to earn it, and it feels so rewarding when you have, especially when we're trying to track down those like game tokens in some of those levels.
Right.
And it's like across a chasm, and it's like, oh shit, this is all cloud step, isn't it?
Oh boy.
And it just feels like this deep level of satisfaction when you know that it's entirely skill based and you have super tight controls to back it up as well. So,
a ninja that looks the part was the objectives,
Exactly. So you have the cloud step, which is great, but there's another gimmick here, which is the 8 to 16-bit switch going on as well. So when did that come into play in the game's overall design?
So the scenario always had the story always had the ninja going to the future, and then going back and forth between the past and future. And so the 16-bit just emerged as, hey, that's probably the best way to visually represent that, instead of, we're still 8-bit, but the world is broken or frozen or whatever, which could be cool. But the idea was that, let's hop one console forward, because we're changing generation or whatever, to represent that visually. So yeah, that was just, hey, it's kind of a neat way to address it, and to because the contrast,
I can't imagine
point A
that's
and point
easy.
B, and the breadth between that is the. What's that?
I can't imagine that's easy. Like you doing 8-bit pixels itself is a pain in the ass, and now you're essentially making two games.
You're remastering your own game while you're playing it.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, that's part of why you spend 10 years, cherry picking your people, But I mean, props to the artists for sure.
I should have took 10 years cherry picking.
Did it really shut up?
Oh, shut up! Did the time travel? Now, did this come from a result of the plot of the game, or did you say, "Hey, this could be a fun mechanic"? Okay, how do we explain this? Let's have time travel in the plot. Or did that come before this mechanic?
It was always in the story, and the idea is that because it's always a cycle. So just like you got the scroll, then you pass the scroll to someone else. And so, I mean, at first, the idea of going to the future was always there, just because time travel. I mean, it's a time traveling ninja. Why not? But there were a few options that were considered, and at first, one of the ideas was that you would just constantly replay the same loop, but you would have opportunities to try different paths, until eventually you did everything and then you solved it, but then it was like, no, let's stick to the same heroes and not reset the controls, and then turning the quote unquote, with big quotes, Metroidvania. I don't know that we're a legit Metroidvania there, but the debate is still open on that. But yeah, the idea of going back and forth in the two worlds was basically that since it follows what it does in the story, we should have something visually to represent that, to have the full impact,
I just want to say how I really love the fact that you turned down Castlevania 3 when you were a kid. Still got Castlevania elements.
Right.
Somehow.
Scary Castlevania. Very spooky.
Super scary. So,
speaking of little creepy little demons.
Oh, yes. Such great segues here in the podcast. I'm loving the flow here. I'm loving the flow.
108 episodes of mistakes led all to this moment.
Right, so Corbel, that little fucker, who I think is, aside from the robe mages, the primary source of humor in the Messenger.
Sure.
So the game has, I would say, it's got a pretty decent amount of challenge. It's like, again, if you played these games as a kid, platformers, they're not going to be easy. And yet you took it a step further to add this other element to the gameplay to make it even a little bit more difficult. So how did he come to be, Corbel?
So you're saying Corbel makes the game more difficult, or?
I mean, he does rob you of some of your time shards as you're playing along. So it's
sure.
It is a punishing mechanic. Like it sort of it makes you not want to fail. I think like he's like there to sort of remind you like you fucked up, buddy.
But it's roughly so right. But it's roughly so you don't loot the same shards twice up to where you died. Roughly, because you gotta have. So here's the thing, right? So part of the process of designing a game like this for today, it's like you want to make it as good as what we remember, and which is some of them weren't that great, and some mechanics didn't age well at all, So like Lives and Continues, right? And so the way it came to be was, okay, so we need something to handle death, we need infinite lives because the game is really long. It's not like 8 levels, but it takes 5 days to beat because it's hard. It's actually because it's long. So you don't want a game over to hit you in the middle and you have to redo everything again. So that was already, okay, so let's have checkpoints, right? Because if you die, you need to go back. Then you need a penalty for dying. Otherwise, it's just infinite lives. And challenges, basically the challenge loses a bit of its meaning because you have no fear of failing, right? And so you don't feel so much engaged or compelled to succeed. There has to be something you don't want to happen, And if it's just running back, then it just sucks. It's just a chore,
I don't like being mocked by a demon in a game.
You don't?
That's what I don't like.
That's what you do to me every episode. You're my little Corbel.
That's where I learned it from. And this little fucker says to me, "Are you playing with your feet?"
I'm sure.
But so he prevents you from grinding time shards by dying, in a place where there's a lot. Or you can just wait for him to leave and then you get to loot those again. But then in the time that you spend waiting kind of evens out in so that it doesn't become grinding. Also, he brings a bit of comical relief because dying is a bit frustrating. So we give you at least something to look forward to, which is, what's going to be which disc am I going to get this time around, And then he's also
so many of them.
And then he's also kind of like a dunce cap, if that makes sense, It's kind of like, hey, shame on you. Like if this guy's following you, it means that you failed recently. So it's kind of like a reminder, And then, I mean, it's the ninja with a familiar. I mean, how cute is that? The one-eyed flying demon. I mean, maybe he's annoying. He's annoying to a lot of people. I find that everyone has like sort of like a love-hate relationship.
It's so Castlevania at the same time.
What do you mean?
Like in whatchamacallit, Symphony of the Night, there was the whole familiar system in that game. So again,
right.
Elements of that as well.
That's right. Yeah. For me, it was more. So the game Shatterhand. It's on NES.
Or the little robots you would get.
Yeah. So you would get that. Yeah, I just always liked that look of your character with something flying. Which,
man.
if people from our Discord are listening, that is not the Shatterhand ref in the game that you're looking for, but still.
That is, that's a classic game, Shatterhand. I'm so glad you mentioned that game. See, now
Right.
my respect for you has increased tenfold.
It was dwindling with that Quarble nonsense you just spewed,
Right.
trying to justify that little mutant. All right, so Devolver Digital. All right,
Yeah.
they're putting their feet firmly in the sand here. They are jumping with both feet in, taking the swimmies off in the deep end of the pool, as it were, when it comes to video games, the game industry, specifically the independent scene. Tell us how they got involved, and maybe your thoughts about that partnership.
Well, I mean, at first we had been trying to reach out for a while, because it was like, hey, we'd like to be with Devolver. It's like, yeah, well, who wouldn't, you know? And so they're really in a position where, I mean, they're always, I mean, they're really friendly and all, but it's not like, I mean, they're so busy and they get swamped with requests, you know. So it's kind of like, how do you stand out? And so for us, we went to so it was PAX South 2018. So we released the reveal trailer on January 4th, I think, and then January 8th, something like that, was PAX South. And so we were just there, and we just got the chance to you know, just one guy showed up at the booth and he was like, okay, what do you got? And so I gave him the 5-minute pitch, and he said, can I send the team? And I was like, sure. Then I pitched to too many people to not stress out. So after a big panic attack and a pitch I don't remember giving, everyone was like, that sounds pretty cool. We think we want it, but we're booked, so we can't really do it, but we might still do it. And so them being, you know, crazy and awesome, they took the game, basically. It happened like really fast, you know. If you're talking to publishers, it can be like, oh, let's try to discuss and pitch again and send another demo, but change this or that, or oh, give me your plan or whatever. But they were just, they're, for them, it seems like it just clicked, you know. And I don't know if it was us or the game, probably a mix of both, but they certainly, like, you know, because as publishers, you're also content curators, you know. You have your portfolio of games that you published, and you have a fan base, and you have to, whenever you add something to it,
Right.
Or at least those are just my thoughts. I've never published anything, but like, you know, I figure you got to make sure it's a fit in some way, you know. And so
your audience.
I guess they saw something.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess they saw something in there that I, to be honest, still don't fully understand. But they're just always so chill and so helpful that, yeah, we're kind of living the dream, to be honest.
There's some crazy folks at that company, and I love them to death.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like the perfect home for this game. All right, so the game is now as a publisher. It's all locked in. You got Devolver, huge backing.
Yeah.
And the game it's going to get released as a release date, and it's out there. What does that feel like for your team and for you? Like, this is like a childhood dream that you've carried for all these years, and now it's a real thing that folks will be criticizing and reviewing and judging. What's that like for you at this point?
I mean, no, because I mean, it's a really good question. I was so deep into it, you know. It's all I did, you know, and so it was, for me, like, I was really excited, but I kind of realized at that point that it had gotten bigger than me, you know, and it wasn't even out yet. And so instead of feeling a stress, I was like, okay, it's the moment now, you know, and the team and everyone, it's just the atmosphere that we have at the studio. It's, you know, it's like a family, you know, because it's all people, we've known each other for so long, and we all agreed on the work conditions that we wanted and the vibe at the studio and all of that. And so it was just like, look, we have each other, so let's just do this. And it really was a lot of work, because we decided to increase the scope a little bit, you know, to achieve the complete vision, you know, and everybody decided to show up and do what it would take to release the complete vision of the game, which was a few more levels, a few more bosses and all of that, which are all in there. And so, yeah, I mean, but it wasn't a stress. It was more like, it felt like an opportunity. And but for me, I felt really vulnerable, because the other side, the thing I would have done with my life, probably if it weren't for video games, would probably have been something in the track of psychology. I'm very interested in that, and the personal growth journey for me has been a huge deal. And all of what a lot of what I poured in the game has to do with my coming of age and understanding and gripes with anxiety and depression and all of that. And so for me, realizing that it would be all those eyeballs on it now is like, well, it's kind of like very much my personal story, even though they're all metaphors. It's still all very real and personal to me. And what if people mock it? And so that's why I was hesitant, on some shopkeeper stories. Should I remove, especially the last one in the music box? Should I remove it? What if people decide to make fun of it or whatever? But I mean, no, we're getting emails of fully grown men who cry because of it. So,
Oh man.
so there's that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean the game has so much heart and so much humor because I feel like it's a very personal story. You can tell that someone that really loves games, that grew up around video games, made this story.
Right.
And it shines through so beautifully. And of course the game is released and it's rave reviews, and you guys are just, I'm guessing, ecstatic at that point. Like they get it, they love it.
Actually, we're exhausted at that point, but yeah. Oh yeah. At first, I didn't look at the numbers or anything for about 2 weeks. I just slept and took walks in the woods because so here's the thing. It's such an all-in to do, with your time, your money, your career, your name, your emotions, and all of that. You're like, dude, if that doesn't work out, I can't. Like my happiness and well-being, or at least mental stability, cannot depend on the outcome of that, So you don't want to develop a big ego if it works out, and you don't want to sink into depression if it doesn't work out, And so I just took some time away and recentered on important stuff that I had, set aside because I was too involved in developing the game, or finishing it at least.
Right.
And when I felt ready to like not take the response personally, I was like, all right, let's take a look, and it was good. So it's great because we get to all work together on more games, basically.
Okay, so the game comes out.
Yeah.
You take 2 weeks to walk in the woods. You come back. Your bank account is flooded. You buy 2 yachts. Immediately, you got these 2 yachts. Then you have this. I don't know if it was always planned, but then now you're working on DLC for this bad boy. We got Picnic Panic. All right. Was this always a part of the game's roadmap? Was this something that you just decided after the game was released? You're like, you know what? I want to do more for this thing. I want to tell this other story.
So there was the so wait, this is kind of big. So what happened is we took a month off, and then we did so basically gave the whole team a month off. We flew everyone to PAX West for the lunch, had the lunch party. Rainbow Dragon Eyes played at the Hard Rock Cafe. We had a friggin' blast. Devolver was there. Everyone was there. It was amazing. Then everyone is off for a whole month. We need to recenter and think of everything. And so then we did kind of like a summit, which is basically we rented a cabin for a week with the whole team. And it's like, look, everyone, here's the deal. And I was trying to give them the vision for the next game that we would be making, which is it's not Picnic Panic, but it's something else, and then also this, which is just in some added content. And so Picnic Panic is the first chapter of a trilogy that we may or may not do. It might end there. At the moment, it looks like we don't know yet what we'll be doing with that. Okay. But we've been mostly working on something else that we'll announce, and it's probably a couple years from being announced. But that's mainly what we've been focusing on, that bigger picture, because so as I said, all our games will take place in the same universe, and basically the Ninja Messenger's role has been played already in that big story. So Picnic Panic is just like an added side quest of just more shenanigans with that character and his local beef or whatever, But it doesn't kick into the big arc.
So why did you decide to do it? Did you just want to support the game because it did so well, or did you have something left that you wanted to tell everybody?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, to riff on what you said earlier, I did not buy any yachts, So,
you were like, you know what? I'm gonna get Canada, being on the
so that's the thing about, keeping the cool head, and with Martin, who's like I said earlier, I founded the Sabotage with Martin. We agreed from the get-go, it's like, hey, we're not here to like become people that we weren't when we first set out to do this, and so what that means for us to have received a good response is that, hey, great, we have all this time, and so for the next game it can be not ready until it's ready, and we don't have to work extra just to make it fit in some until we're out of money and we close the doors or whatever. And so Picnic Panic was like, look, we can afford it, and we have a big fan base to thank, so why not do it, with our time? So we took about 6 months, I would say, of full-time dev for us. And it was legit just as a thank you. And but it also makes sense, it wasn't primarily a business decision, but it also makes sense to, we increase the offer. So maybe some people that were on the fence are like, I'll get the game now or whatever, So
Yeah, because you guys were on the Kind of Funny Game Showcase.
Yeah.
And then you made the announcement, and it was a free update coming, I think. So that was always part of the plan, making it a free, like a thank you to all your fans that were with you for the entire ride. Like this is for you, essentially.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because just like we, just like by starting Sabotage, we get to be the bosses we wish we had, and we work on the games we wish we worked on, and then we release the game we wish some studio released. Then we can also act as the way we wish companies acted.
Do you think DLC should be, or add-on should be, aimed at a free component for developers?
Sorry. Oh, you mean if it should be a thing that everyone should do?
Yeah. Should they aim for delivering free content down the line for their main game?
I mean, that's so hard to tell. I mean, it really all depends on. Like for us, it's like we'd rather make free DLC than just go crazy with our money, So it's like I don't know that another private individual has to also make that call, But it was also, thought through as a decision of like, hey, look, the game will get more exposure, and we have speedrunners, and it gives them more content and all of that. So it's good for many reasons, but it also depends on the kind of game that you're making,
Right.
The thing is, it's also, I mean, can you afford it? Do you feel like doing it? Is it like for us? No, but I mean, there was a bit of a risk to it too, right? It's like, hey, what if the shopkeeper is depleted? What if, what if it was just once in a lifetime, script to write, and then it just feel like we're trying too hard or we're overstaying our welcome? What if the game becomes too big and it doesn't make sense anymore? What if we push the humor too much and people, they kind of like disconnect because they're like, oh, I don't really take the game seriously anymore, or it broke what it did for me. By doing that, I'm looking at the game differently now, and I don't like it so much anymore. Like it may very well have been that for some people, they'd rather we hadn't done that, But I mean, the response is good, but so far, but it was still a risk,
Yeah, that's nutty, because I feel like, listen, for me as a huge fan of the game, having a reason to go back into this world is always a plus for me. So,
all right,
it was a long time since I picked up the game, and as soon as it came out, I was like, "Yep, I'm going right back in." I had 72 hours on that game, and way more to come.
Nice. So did you play through then, or?
Yes, I did. I mean, after I had a very pitiful PAX East display earlier this year, trying to beat that octopus boss.
Yeah.
And
we did tone it down though.
So it was a redemption moment.
Well,
for me.
when you yourself had to cheat and get in the debug menu to get to the damn thing, I assumed some balancing needed to be done.
Right. Well, I mean, and PAX East was kind of a test for us. It was good for that, to have such a big player base to play test, because it was a new gameplay that's totally a stranger to the game that we did. So it was harder to balance, So it helped out a lot.
Well, you did a great job.
Cool.
So, Andy, before we go on to these last little cluster of questions,
yes.
I want to change gears here a little bit, just to kind of freshen things up a little bit. Maybe give you time to rest your voice. I want you. Do you have any questions for Andy, who has spent 72 hours in your game? Do you have any questions for him about his experience with the game? Is there anything that you want to know from a player, from somebody who also grew up loving these games? What questions do you have for Andy?
Oh boy, this is
wow. There's one thing. I mean, it's kind of a trick question, but do you know why it's called the Messenger?
Oh, okay. Now this is like, now I'm a dummy.
Okay, I have other questions.
I'm trying to now it's like it's a whole metaphorical, symbolical thing going on.
Mhm.
I feel like because you're delivering, I think, a message.
Mhm.
I think that was the main. Not to spoil too much, because once the game gets to the final act, there are some like tear jerky moments that caught me off
Right.
guard.
Right.
And
Okay.
Yeah, so I feel like the scroll is the message that you're delivering, in a sense.
Right. Or rather a metaphor, right? And
Right,
the actual
yes.
message is
Right.
more about, growth and such. And so
Right.
that's the thing is I don't know how, and that was really hard to try to design, but
Mhm.
from some of the feedback that we're getting, people connected with the final story.
Yeah.
It caught them off guard, but it also created like some resonance or whatever, kind of felt something, and it opened up for them. And so that was like very much the intent. But it's like, how do you get people into introspection through a pixel ninja, like ninjas and personal growth? What a terrible pitch,
And the thing is, though, it's you're playing this game, and it's like it's laced with humor the entire way, and then you get to a certain point, and there's a very long cutscene.
Yeah.
I put the controller down, and it's like, oh, I'm watching a little short movie now, and it lays out all this beautiful lore that you wouldn't expect from a game that's just mocking you at every single death and every single turn. And it gets really serious. And then you have the last few encounters of the game, and it's really a thing of beauty. And it puts you back in this place, like there's heart in this game, and there's so much of it. And now I'm getting all teary-eyed thinking about it.
So all right, no, sorry about that. But
I'm kidding.
Okay. But I mean, so part of the metaphor is how we often use humor to cope with pain, right?
Right.
But in the end, it becomes real again. So, but yeah,
you're a psychology major after all.
But so here's the thing: like that long cutscene that you mentioned,
Yeah.
it could have been the intro of the game, right? You're like, okay, here's the whole deal, and here's why you need to set out and do that. Now, as a player, I hate it when a game tells me about like, oh, this government and this continent and these gods, and you're like, wait, do I even care about your game? Well, how's the gameplay? Like, why are you telling me all this lore that So I should care about, I should develop my relationship with the game first, and once I care, then maybe tell me more about it,
Right.
But don't give me an earful, like up front before we even determine. No, but like those JRPGs where you're stuck in the village for like 2 hours, and you're like, maybe I won't even like the combat and won't bother playing it. So who are all these characters I'm supposed to learn about?
It assumes you'll care about them, but
right.
Your approach was, I have to make you care about these characters and the world. So I'm going to let you go in with very little, and I'll give you more towards the end. And the payoff is massive at that point.
It was the intention, at least.
Yeah.
So I have a question. What was it like watching the creators of Ninja Gaiden play your game?
It was that was dude, like
help me broke him.
so we're at Bit Summit, right? Last year, which is in Kyoto, Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And we're eating a bowl of rice on the sidewalk outside, just taking a 10-minute break. And then Nigel from Devolver sends me a text, and he's like, the Ninja Gaiden creators are playing your game. I'm like, what? So we just tossed away the lunch and walked in, and I was like, oh God, I hope I pronounced their names properly. And so it was the composer and the designer. And then they played the game, and then we took a picture, which they wanted to take. It's like they're honored, like we're not, like it's supposed to be them that they're honored that we're doing something and we like their game back in the day and we remember it or whatever. And they called it Ninja Gaiden 4.
Wow, really?
That is nuts.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it happened off the record, but it did happen with 3 witnesses. And so then I went to cry in the men's room for about 15 minutes. I actually took a selfie. I was like, I'm saving that. Like, I want to remember that moment.
Oh
I was
God.
crying so hard. It was absolutely surreal. And the composer ended up writing 2 tracks. inspired by the Messenger's universe. Yeah, they're not in the game because he was really insistent that it was Rainbow Dragon Eye's work, and he didn't want to like. But we have it as part of the official complete soundtrack. He has 2 tracks in there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so we have one more longer form question here, and then we're going to do a couple of quick hits, and then we'll wrap things up here. So you kind of touched on that you're working on something else, but I don't want to pry into that. So we're going to make this like a kind of a general question here. What classic game from your childhood would you like to see somebody else give the Messenger treatment to? Like me, I don't want to put it on your shoulders because I don't want you to have to dance around it because maybe you are doing something like that. But like, is there a game from your child, one of those games like a Contra or something that you picked up that you want somebody else to do what you did with the Messenger?
Well, I mean, and to be transparent, like we don't shy from like we say it. Like we do retro aesthetics and modern game design, and so what we do is we do the sabotage treatment on certain genres, right? So you take Messenger, that's our side scroller or action platformer, if you will,
Right.
Then we can maybe do that to the versus fighter or to the first person shooter, and so it's basically looking at something that we use, that we still love, but really loved as when we were younger, and then look at irritants and try to remove them to modernize the experience and make it, a contemporary expression of what was good in there. So there's certainly more where that came from, and 2 other genres and whatnot. One thing that I really lost it when there was a tweet from Cory Barlog from the God of War creative director, and he tweeted something to the effect of, "I'm a director asking you to please let me do Chrono Trigger God of War treatment on Chrono Trigger," or something like that. I was like, what? Like full on AAA, cutscenes and all of that. I was like, that would be like, I would pay like $2,000 to play that game. Like this guy in the driver's seat, doing the Chrono Trigger remake, that would be wow. But yeah, no, I mean, other than that, I think we're seeing, like I'm playing Time Spinner right now on the Switch. Yeah, which is, it's great. Like for me, those are all good examples, and in the end, gaming is a celebration, and I just think of everyone as finding their own way to celebrate, and so any like, it's not like there's a specific one I wish was redone, but I just love seeing that the spirit of the kind of experience that could only emerge from simplicity, is still alive. I do like me a AAA title, from time to time, but there's just a thing about simpler games,
So about those simpler games, what are some of your favorite indie games of late that you've been playing?
You mean lately,
besides Time Spinner? Yeah, or like in recent memory.
Yeah, well, I mean, so Time Spinner is I'm deeply into it at the moment. I'm really excited for Cyber Shadow.
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah, I can't wait. I mean,
yeah.
I played it like 5 minutes at PAX East, but I'm already sold. Obviously, it's a Ninja retro game, so and it's funny because the developers, he told me like, hey, I haven't played Messenger because my reward is I get to play a retro Ninja game when I release mine, so he's saving it as his, puts one out in the world and he gets to play one. That it seems fair. So, but yeah, I can't wait to play that one. I mean, Shovel Knight is an obvious one, I know, but maybe it's even boring to mention it at this point, but it was a big one for sure. No, but I mean,
game.
it's so obvious, it's like, who doesn't like Shovel Knight? But no, Shovel Knight really, I was like, wow, and so also there was Hollow Knight. I feel like I'll just be naming obvious titles, but I basically play most of them. I've just finished not to push the Devolver, but I've been playing My Friend Pedro these last few days.
Oh yes,
had a blast with it. I'm done now, sadly, but I think I'll replay it just because I was way better with the controls by the end, so I kind of want to replay the beginning, to see what I can pull up there. But no, other than that, I'm trying to get into Octopath Traveler, which I tried, and then I had a hard time with all the origin stories of everyone. I felt like I was always at chapter 1,
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't fully lift off for me, but I'm being told that later it gets, it has a bit more rhythm, so I want to try and go deeper. But yeah, so that's kind of what I'm playing these days.
Yeah, definitely give that game a chance. I think Octopath, like it takes a while to grow on you from a narrative perspective. It has really solid gameplay, but just it doesn't catch it like a Final Fantasy VI did back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
From a plot perspective. But just stay with it. Trust me, it's very rewarding. And there is one last thing I'd like to ask you. This is a personal question and a personal wish.
Okay.
Is there any chance for a Ruxton origin story spin-off game?
Well, man, it's funny you mentioned that because we had a live Q&A with the Discord, our Discord community the other day, and they asked if you had, I don't remember, but the question was to the effect of like if you had for no reason budget for a Netflix series, and my answer was maybe Rockstar Origins.
Yes.
I legit said exactly that for real. Because anyway, it's a thing I might like to explore. I don't know that he has gameplay potential. I mean, he probably does, but that's the thing is we have this big roster of characters now, and they each have a lot of personality and backstory. So yeah, we could certainly go places. But it's not like there's no chance, but it's not the next thing we're doing. I can tell you that.
So you're saying there's a chance. All right. That's all
I mean, yeah, why not?
All right, to wrap things up, our Twitter, we had a couple of questions. One you already answered, but I do want to give a shout out to Harry at Ill Grill Chill. He wanted to know what your what's an indie game on the Switch or another console that you're enjoying. But you already answered that, so we'll move on to the second question here, which is from Brendan Groom at Groom. He said, have you changed your mind about Super Mario RPG being a good game yet? Crying face.
What? So that's Brendan from Pass the Controller. So because we talked about I remember we talked about Super Mario RPGs, but to be clear, it's in my top 10. I don't know if I said I didn't like it. I should not have said that. But what I did do though is completely destroy the plot really simply, and that's still annoying to me that the world in Super Mario RPG is a donut, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, it's like Mario lives right next to Bowser, and then he goes to fight him, and then the bridge gets destroyed. And so it's like, oh, I have to go in through the back door. So then you're going to trip around the world just to make it back to the castle. It's kind of stupid. Like, why not rebuild the bridge when you know the king of Mushroom Kingdom,
And that's
but anyway,
why it's in your top
You could
10.
probably get some cheap Goomba labor. I mean, you could probably take.
Right? Yeah. I mean, there has to be a way. So that bit is kind of like weird, not weird, but like it's kind of silly when you think about it. But everything else about the game is amazing, and I love it to death, and I beat it every year at least 3 times.
So I hope that that answers your question, Brendan. All right. All right, so that's gonna do it, man. We got to the end of this bad boy. Where can everybody find the Messenger and Picnic Panic?
Well, so the Messenger is on the Switch, PS4, and PC. So PC, we got the Steam, GOG, and then you can also we're also on the Microsoft Game Pass for PC. And then Picnic Panic is free, so it's just a DLC that you download on the digital store of your of where you got the game.
Sweet.
You just install it, and that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this, man. This was awesome. This was a
All right.
great conversation. Really enjoy this one, Thierry. That was really awesome. Remember, folks, Nintendo Dual Screens podcast is part of the Proven Gamer Podcast Network, which includes Trophy Horse, a PlayStation podcast, Game Stuff, a general games discussion podcast, and PG Spoilers, a movie, television, video game, whatever. You want to talk spoilers? That's your podcast, and it's user-generated and unedited and unfiltered. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so. We are at NDS Podcast on both Twitter and Instagram. I am at Batchild27. Andy is at Pansky. And Thierry, where can everybody find you?
So I'm at Sabotoy, SABOTOY, and we're also at Messenger Game and at Sabotage QC on Twitter.
It's a beautiful thing. Remember, folks, you could watch a stream at twitch.tv/dualscreenstreams. Give us a little follow over there. Maybe if you give us a sub, you could get some Fraser Crane heads that you could drop in the chat. Little Disgruntled Steve and Disgruntled Andy heads. They're great. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to be streaming a lot while Andy is gone, so there's going to be plenty of opportunities to come hang out. Special thanks to our contributors to the show. That's Zazu Pitts of Sour Note Productions for our theme song, 16-Bit Attack. See, we did our own little 8 to 16-bit jump
Holy
into music.
shit, we did.
We did it first. It was first. Special thanks to Matt Murray for our Twitch overlays. Thank you, Dan Colonna of Dinosaur Machines and Hit Buttons for our Nintendo Dual Screens logo. Thank you, Andrew Douglas. Excuse me, for our podcast art, all our fancy art, which you're seeing now.
We got some brand new art
Brand
too,
new
which
art.
is amazing.
Looks really good. I'm really enjoying it. Good stuff. That's gonna do it, man. Andy, is there anything you want to tell the kids before we go? You just want to say, I mean,
No,
you're
I have
back
no
from
guests to
No, you're not back.
announce. I'll be on vacation for 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah, that's all. That's
Get
all.
out of my
I'm thinking
life
right
and
now.
leave me alone. That's what I gotta say to you. Thierry, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure hanging out with you.
Thanks for having me. It was great. Yeah, it was fun.
Awesome. That's it, folks. This has been Nintendo Dual Screens episode 109 for the week of July 29th, 2018. If you want to listen to this episode's pre- and post-show shenanigans, you could do so by supporting us at Patreon, patreon.com/NDSpodcast. And guess what? Since Andy's leaving, I'm going to do some surprise shit for these next 2 episodes. I'm going to do some fun bonus content for you listeners over at Patreon. So go to patreon.com/NDSpodcast. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Thierry. Thank you, Andy. Until next time, take care. And as always, please be excellent to each other.